The glass walls of Harrison and Associates' downtown office reflected the setting sun, turning the building into a tower of fire. Appropriate, I thought, considering what would happen in tomorrow's meeting. My name is Lisa Chin, and for 2 years I've been the invisible architect behind the firm's most celebrated designs. Lisa, dear, the presentation boards for tomorrow still need to be mounted. Richard Harrison's voice dripped with condescension as he passed my desk. And make sure you use the good adhesive this time. We can't have anything falling off during the Shimizu presentation. I nodded obediently, watching my father-in-law stride toward his corner office. His custom Italian suit probably cost more than my yearly salary as the firm's technical assistant, their polite term for glorified secretary and blueprint copier. What Richard didn't know was that those presentation boards displayed my designs, not his. Just like he didn't know that the Singapore tower that won the firm international acclaim last year was my creation, or that the revolutionary sustainable housing complex in Dubai that graced the cover of Architectural Digest had sprung from my imagination, not his. Still here, little sister. My husband's voice pulled me from my thoughts. James Harrison leaned against my desk, loosening his tie after another difficult day of taking credit for other people's work. Dad needs the Shimizu boards perfect for tomorrow. It's a $100 million project. I knew exactly how much the Shimizu project was worth. I'd spent 6 months designing every detail of the proposed cultural center, incorporating elements of traditional Japanese architecture with cutting-edge sustainable technology. But officially, I was just the woman who mounted the presentations and made sure the coffee was fresh. I'll take care of it, James, I said quietly, the same quiet voice I'd used when he convinced me to take this job instead of pursuing my own architectural career. The firm needs someone we can trust, he'd said. Someone to handle the technical details while we focus on the real work. The real work. Like the client lunches where they presented my designs as their own. Or the industry awards they collected for innovations they couldn't even fully explain. I watched James walk away, remembering how different things had been when we first met in graduate school. Back then, he'd admired my designs, encouraged my creativity. But something changed after we married, and he brought me into his father's firm. Suddenly, my ideas needed to be filtered through senior architects. My suggestions had to be refined by more experienced professionals. So I learned to be quiet, to watch and wait, to let them think I was just the helpful wife, the diligent assistant, the blueprint girl. And in that invisibility, I found power. It started small. James would mention a design challenge, and I would casually suggest a solution. Richard would complain about a technical issue, and I would quietly leave the perfect reference material on his desk. Soon they began relying on me to review their work, which really meant fixing their mistakes and enhancing their mediocre designs. Then came the Singapore Tower project. The client rejected 3 of Richard's designs, and the deadline was looming. Late one night, I slipped my own design into the pile of reference materials I prepared for Richard's review. 3 days later, he presented it as his own work. The client loved it. After that, it became a pattern. When important projects came in, I would anonymously submit designs through the firm's internal review system. Richard or James would always claim them, excited to take credit for work so innovative yet technically precise. They never questioned where these mysterious submissions came from. Their egos wouldn't let them imagine that the quiet woman bringing their coffee could be the creative genius they were looking for. But I kept records of everything. Every design, every submission, every piece of evidence showing my work and their fraud. The digital trail was buried deep in the firm's servers, encrypted and secured, waiting for the right moment. That moment would come tomorrow, during the Shimizu presentation. Lisa, Richard's voice boomed across the office. Where are those revised elevation drawings? Right here, Mr. Harrison. I called back, pulling out the drawings I finished 2 weeks ago. My subtle signature was hidden in every design, a pattern of lines and angles that only made sense if you knew where to look. Excellent. Make sure the conference room is set up by 8 tomorrow. Mr. Shimizu is very particular about punctuality. I smiled, thinking of the email I'd received yesterday from Hideo Shimizu himself. The legendary architect had seen something familiar in Harrison and Associates' recent designs. Something that reminded him of a thesis project he'd mentored 10 years ago at Harvard. My thesis project. Of course, Mr. Harrison. Everything will be perfect for tomorrow's meeting. Richard paused at my desk, his expression softening slightly. You know, Lisa, you've been a real asset to this firm. Not many women would be content in a support role, but you understand your place. James is lucky to have such an accommodating wife. I thought about the USB drive in my purse, containing proof of every design they'd stolen. About the emails from Mr. Shimizu indicating he'd be bringing his entire review team to tomorrow's presentation. About the documentation I'd sent to the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I know exactly what my place is. After everyone left for the evening, I stayed to finish preparing the presentation boards. Each one showcased my designs, my innovations, my vision for a cultural center that would honor both tradition and progress. Tomorrow, they would present these boards as their work, not knowing that every detail had been carefully chosen to reveal the truth. My phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Shimizu's assistant. Review team assembled. All arrangements confirmed for tomorrow. I walked to the window, watching the sun set behind the city skyline. Somewhere out there was the plot of land where the Shimizu Cultural Center would be built. Richard and James thought tomorrow's presentation would secure their biggest project yet. They had no idea they were walking into a carefully designed revelation of their own fraud. Working late again. The cleaning lady, Maria, poked her head into the office. In 2 years, she was the only person who'd ever asked to see my personal design portfolio, the only one who knew what I was capable of. Just finishing up some preparations for tomorrow, Maria. It's going to be an interesting meeting. She smiled knowingly. About time, Mahija. About time. I gathered my things, taking one last look at the presentation boards. Tomorrow would change everything. But for tonight, I was still the invisible architect, the blueprint girl, the secret designer whose work had transformed a mediocre firm into an industry leader. Let them sleep well, dreaming of the acclaim they thought they'd receive. Morning would bring a very different kind of recognition. The morning of the Shimizu presentation dawned clear and bright. I arrived at the office 2 hours early, making sure everything was perfectly arranged in the conference room. The presentation boards stood on their easels, my hidden signatures woven into every design. The digital presentation waited on the server, each slide containing metadata that would prove its true origin. Richard and James arrived together at 8:30, both wearing their most expensive suits. Everything ready? Richard barked, straightening his tie. Yes, Mr. Harrison. Coffee service is arranged, presentation materials are in place, and I hesitated for effect. Mr. Shimizu just called. He's bringing his entire review team, plus some special consultants. James frowned. Consultants? What consultants? Before I could answer, the elevator doors opened. Hideo Shimizu stepped out, followed by his team of architects and designers. But it was the people behind them that made Richard's face pale slightly. Representatives from the American Institute of Architects Ethics Committee and the editor-in-chief of Architectural Digest. Welcome to Harrison and Associates, Richard recovered quickly, stepping forward with his practiced charm. We're honored to have such a distinguished audience for today's presentation. Mr. Shimizu's eyes swept the office, finally landing on me. A slight smile touched his lips as he recognized his former student. The honor is ours, Mr. Harrison. We're very interested in understanding your firm's design process. The conference room filled quickly. I took my usual place in the corner, laptop ready to advance slides while Richard and James presented my work as their own. Just like always, except this time, I had reprogrammed the presentation software to include a few surprises. The Shimizu Cultural Center represents a revolutionary approach to architectural harmony. Richard began, gesturing to the first board. Our design incorporates traditional Japanese elements while pushing the boundaries of sustainable technology. Fascinating, Mr. Shimizu interrupted. The integration of these elements reminds me of a thesis project I mentored at Harvard. A student explored similar themes of cultural fusion and environmental responsibility. James laughed nervously. Great minds think alike, I suppose. Indeed, Mr. Shimizu turned to the ethics committee members. Would you agree that the design language is remarkably similar? Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the technical specifications. Yes, let's, said the committee chair, opening a laptop. Could you explain the parametric modeling used in the central atrium design? I watched Richard flounder, trying to explain concepts he barely understood. James jumped in to help. but only managed to contradict himself about the sustainability systems I'd integrated into the design. "If I may," Mr. Shimizu said quietly, "I believe we should ask the actual architect to explain her work." The room went silent. "I don't understand," Richard said stiffly. "I personally developed these designs." Mr. Shimizu smiled. "Did you? Then perhaps you can explain why the metadata on every digital file lists Lisa Chen as the original creator, or why the design elements contain the same signature pattern she developed during her graduate studies." "That's impossible," James stammered. "Lisa just handles technical documentation." "Actually," I stood up, connecting my laptop to the main display, "I handle a lot more than that." The screen filled with evidence, timestamps showing when I created each design, server logs documenting my submissions, emails where Richard and James acclaimed my work as their own. But most damning were the progression drawings, detailed documentation of how each design evolved from concept to completion, all in my distinctive style. The Singapore Tower that won your firm the International Design Award last year? I clicked through the evidence. My design developed over 6 months while you were focused on the facade color. Another click. The Dubai Sustainable Housing Complex? I created that while you were arguing about parking space ratios. "This is absurd," Richard sputtered. "She's just a technical assistant." "No," the editor of Architectural Digest spoke up. "She's the architect whose work has been featured on our cover 3 times, under your names. We've done our own investigation, Mr. Harrison. The evidence is overwhelming." The ethics committee chair stood up. "Harrison and Associates has been under investigation for professional misconduct for the past month. We have documented at least 17 instances of design theft and fraudulent credit attribution." James turned to me, his face a mix of anger and desperation. "Lisa, what have you done?" "I did my job, James. I designed beautiful, innovative buildings. The only difference is that now everyone knows who really created them." Mr. Shimizu cleared his throat. "Ms. Chen, or should I say Mrs. Harrison, the Shimizu Corporation would like to commission you directly for the Cultural Center project. Under your own name, of course." "This is outrageous." Richard slammed his fist on the table. "We'll sue for breach of contract." "I wouldn't advise that." A new voice joined the conversation. Amanda Torres, the firm's own legal counsel, stepped forward. "Mrs. Harrison's contract specifically states that she retains intellectual property rights to any design she creates. It's on page 6 of the employment agreement you signed without reading." The next few hours were a blur of legal discussions and professional consequences. Richard and James were suspended from the American Institute of Architects pending a full ethics review. The firm's recent awards were rescinded, to be reissued under my name. Major clients began calling, wanting to work directly with the architect whose designs had actually impressed them. Harrison and Associates didn't survive the scandal, but from its ashes rose Chen Design Group, my own firm dedicated to innovative, sustainable architecture. Most of the staff chose to stay, many admitting they had suspected the truth but been afraid to speak up. James filed for divorce a week later, unable to face the humiliation of being exposed as a fraud. The last time I saw him, he was packing up his office, avoiding the eyes of employees who now knew him for what he was. "You could have just told us," he said quietly. "We might have made you a partner." I thought about all the times I tried to claim credit for my work, all the times they dismissed or belittled my contributions. "No, James, you needed to learn that talent doesn't care about titles or family connections. It cares about truth." Richard attempted damage control through expensive PR firms, but the evidence was too clear. His reputation in the architectural community was destroyed. The last I heard, he was retiring to Florida, far from the industry he had tried to deceive. 1 year later, I stood at the groundbreaking ceremony for the Shimizu Cultural Center. Mr. Shimizu himself introduced me to the crowd as one of the most innovative architects of her generation. As I explained my design to the assembled guests, I caught sight of Maria, the cleaning lady who had been my first real supporter. She was sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. I had made her head of facilities management at Chen Design Group. Her eye for detail and genuine appreciation for good design made her perfect for the role. The Singapore Tower still stands, now with a plaque bearing my name as architect. The Dubai complex continues to win sustainability awards, its true designer finally recognized. But my favorite project is the one that followed the revelation. A public library I designed with windows specifically angled to let in the morning light, illuminating every corner. No shadows, no hidden spaces, nothing but clarity and truth. Last week, a young intern asked me why I had waited so long to expose the fraud. Why I had let them take credit for my work for 2 years. I showed her the Shimizu Cultural Center models, pointing out how each element had been carefully designed to reveal its true nature only when viewed from the right perspective. Sometimes, I told her, you have to let people believe they're seeing the whole picture before you show them what they've been missing. Architecture isn't just about buildings, it's about revealing truth through design. Chen Design Group is now known for more than just innovative architecture. We've become a firm that celebrates transparency, that credits every contributor, that proves creativity and integrity can coexist. Young architects, especially women, seek us out as a place where their talents will be recognized and respected. The old Harrison and Associates building still stands downtown, its glass walls reflecting the sky. But inside, the space has been transformed. Where once there were closed offices and hierarchical spaces, now there's an open studio where designers collaborate freely. Where I once sat quietly copying blueprints, there's now a wall displaying the work of emerging architects, each piece proudly bearing its creator's name. And in my office, I keep one small reminder of the past. The technical assistant nameplate that once sat on my desk. It reminds me that sometimes the greatest designs aren't just the ones we draw on paper, but the ones we create when we architect our own destinies.